for joining. Let me get up. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
All right.
On the bottom, there should be a share screen.
He's getting there.
Okay,
Just clicked it.
great.
All right. How about now?
Yep, it's there.
All right. So I'll just jump right into it. My topic is developing an e-commerce environment for a mid-sized medical device company. I do work in the medical device field, and that's why I chose this topic. So I'm going to start off by just explaining why this project is relevant in the first place. So small to mid-size life science companies are pretty risk averse. They don't like to do anything that might ruin their chances of success early on. And for a med device company, such as the one that I made up called Med Dev Company, to keep it simple, it doesn't make sense, in their opinion, to do an e-commerce site. And I really think they're missing out on a lot by not taking advantage of something that people clearly use every day and people want. It really is also a chance for this project to inform others who are thinking about making a pitch to a sales or marketing team about adopting a new technology, not just e-commerce, but really any technology for a company. It kind of shows how it can be done, kind of a template and a standard approach to something that can be pretty daunting. So I chose to do this in the form of a consultant's report. I chose not to do it I chose to not actually create a working e-commerce site for MedDev Company because it was just too risky. I talked to a few people at work, and it just seemed like it wasn't a good idea. Also, after discussing, I think it was Dr. Khan suggested changing the name to something generic and kind of an alias, and not using anything that could be identifiable. I think that was a good approach here. It keeps things simple and doesn't muddy it with anything that can give away any trade secrets, I guess, so to speak. So I chose a consultant's report for a couple of reasons. Of course, it's the legal concerns, but it's also a great way to explore, explain, and just learn a new skill, such as business writing, report, and presentation design, which is something that I've learned my few years in the corporate world, that it's a very valuable skill, and not everyone has that ability to do that. And it really, this project, not just the research, but the output, which is a slide deck and an actual consultant's report, done from the perspective of a made-up consulting company. It really serves as a good template for anyone thinking about doing something like this. So for here, I want to talk a little bit about the design of the actual report. So the consultant's report was a two-prong approach. There's the report section, and then there's the slide deck section. So you have to imagine that this is something that's being presented to a sales and marketing team from a consultant. So you would walk into the boardroom and hand out a substantial packet, which is what I'm about to show you here. And then up on the projector screen, you'd also have the slide deck, which is what I'll show you next. So let me click on this here. So this is the consultant report for MedDev Company. And as you can see at the bottom, Hamilton Consulting Group is the consulting company in this instance. And this is a disclaimer. After doing a little research, I saw that pretty much all these consultants reports have a disclaimer at the beginning. It's something that's easily overlooked, but it's definitely something you want to have there for legal concerns. This is the table of contents. It is in some ways it's similar to my actual thesis report, because I did use information from that, from my actual thesis report research, to translate it into something for the consultant's report. But I did add a few sections and tweak things, remove a few things to make it more digestible for the average corporate employee, something that's a little bit more familiar. Also, a nice feature that Adobe has, which is what I use, which is what program this is in, is that you can make the table of contents link to specific sections. So if you're viewing this in a digital format, you're able to click through to each, to each section right from the table of contents. So I'll go through this really quick here. The executive summary. What this is this is not something that would have been in my thesis report, but something that is usually required and expected in a consultant's report. It's really a quick overview, sort of along the lines of an abstract of what this is all about. Another thing that I added was a client profile. This client profile is for MedDev Company, which, as I mentioned, is a made-up company. However, it is modeled after an actual mid-sized medical device manufacturer. So there is a little truth to it, although it's been tweaked a little bit so that it's not an identifiable entity. And as I go through here, there's the introduction. The scope of work is something that is very important for a consultant's report. It just kind of tells you why we're doing this report and what it's all about. Project limitations, something that I more or less lifted from the thesis report, that all the research that I did, as well as the opportunities. It's just been displayed, in a bulleted fashion, much more concisely than I did in the thesis report section. Of course, the risks. Everyone's got to know the risks. So this is something that I did decide to include in the consultant's report. And within this, I chose to use a lot of screenshots this isn't from necessarily a competitor, but it's from a similar type of company that operates in an e-commerce environment. So I thought it offered a good idea of what could be. And then also within the risk section, I did take the liberty to add in something that is not in the thesis report section, and that is the creation of an e-commerce team. And this is something I think a consultant would do. They would recommend, who to hire, how they should operate within an e-commerce team. So that's something that I added in here to this consultant's report, and you will not see in the actual research section. This is really more of something I got from real life experience and decided to add this in. The benefits, very similar to the risk, just made it much more digestible, bullet points, and just very easy to read. We use the this flow chart here for all of our processes. They all look the same. There's 3 of them. I use the gray to show where you can remove steps within the sales process and how e-commerce would benefit small customers over large customers, which is really at the crux of this. And the sales process, after it's all said and done with e-commerce included, you can see only includes 5 steps as opposed to 7 steps or 8 steps in the previous section. I also did a competitor analysis. This is something that is a little more subjective in terms of where it originated. There isn't a whole lot of access to competitors' actual e-commerce environments on the web. All you can really do is infer from what they make available to the general public and what they have on their product pages. So I did take some screenshots in here to include in the consultant's report. And I did a quick ranking so that it was very visible, very easy to see what 3 of MedDev Company's top competitors were doing in the e-commerce field. These are all much larger companies than MedDev companies, and these are real companies. You may have heard of Bard or Boston Scientific, which is fairly local. and I just rank them based on what the information they make available to the general public about their e-commerce offerings. So this is really just showing the audience that e-commerce is happening in the med device world. It's not a forbidden fruit. It is something that can be done, and it doesn't need to be viewed as a monster hurdle that can't be overcome. And one of the other items on here that I did that was also a little subjective is the product of e-commerce viability for MedDev companies' products. So the products on the left are actual products sold by MedDev company, and the type of device is what I found after going through this is really one of the main determinants of whether or not it can even be sold online. So, for example, something that's a large capital equipment type of device, a large generator or something that rolls around on wheels, probably isn't something that's going to be easily sold online, especially if it's a new product or it's really important or it's still being nurtured or it's a novel product. It's probably not a good idea to sell something like that online. However, something down here, such as disposable probes that would go into the body, or dialysis catheters, which is a tried and true, I'm sorry, not dialysis catheters, angiographic catheters, which is a tried and true medical device, has been around for many, many years. There's not a whole lot of risk involved with that, and there's a high consumer demand. So things like that are disposable and have been around for a while, they lend themselves to be sold online, and competitors are doing it, and it can be done. And then this is just a brief section of the consultant's report that explains what each section in that table is all about, and a conclusion at the end. And so what I'll move on to next is the actual slide deck that would be presented. So the slide deck mirrors what's on, for the most part, what's in the consultant's report, but it's not exact because, as you know, oops, I'm sorry, visual, I'm not sure why I can't click that. Let's see. There we go. The visual, the reading component is not necessarily the same as the visual component. So this, you have to, imagine yourself sitting in a boardroom, you have the consultant's report in front of you, and this is up on the projector screen as the consultant's explaining to you why MedDev companies should develop an e-commerce platform. The look and design for this is, I should mention, is really based around a style guide that I developed myself, and I took the colors, for example, are from the hospital scrubs that you might see doctors and nurses wearing. So you notice the green, the white, blue, the dark blue. There's even a little gray here and there. It kind of gives like a healthcare hospital vibe. So that's where this color scheme came from. And to back up just a little bit, this logo was also made by me. It's same thing. It's got the little EKG monitor, health beat there, and the colors follow the style guide that I created. So moving on, there's the disclaimer that was also in the consultant's report. And the client profile, I decided to use iconography because I think it's a great way to bridge the gap between a text-heavy presentation, which is really what this is, but also make it a little more visually appealing. So it gets people to read in smaller chunks instead of having to try to just read a list of text, which can seem a little daunting, but when you break it up like this, it seems much more friendly. So the introduction breaks it down into scope of work, project limitations, opportunities. Bullet points here for easy digestion of information. Not a whole lot different here from what was in the report. This is the risks. The risks can really be boiled down to 5 main components. And again, I used iconographies to to just kind of spruce things up a little bit and make it a little friendlier appearance. Here is a breakdown of the e-commerce team that I mentioned earlier. This is one of the things that any customer would want to know. Okay, if we do an e-commerce platform, what's the investment? And this, of course, is going to be one of the most significant investments, the creation of an e-commerce team. You need employees backing it up. So this is a rundown, again, in an easily digestible, friendly way of what the company would have to invest in order to get this e-commerce platform up and running and remaining running smoothly. This is something you see a lot in presentations, and I think there's a reason you see it a lot, because it's effective. You throw a big number at somebody that's surprising, and in this case, it's 71% of business-to-business buyers prefer to conduct their own online research before contacting a sales rep, and that is exactly what's going on here. These are business-to-business interactions. It's a hospital or a doctor's office buying products from a med device company. And so this shows that 71% of business-to-business buyers like to conduct their own online research before contacting a sales rep. And if you have an e-commerce platform, it's the perfect place for them to not only research, but also buy your product right there on the spot. Again, this is a similar layout to what I had above, keeping the consistency of the report and of the slide deck, going over the benefits of why an e-commerce portal is beneficial for a mid-size med device company. One of the interesting concepts that I came across during the research that I will call out here is the idea of how price transparency could affect, like within e-commerce, can affect business. Some people view it as a positive and others view it as a negative. I personally believe it is much more beneficial, especially in this instance where having available price information for customers will eliminate the need for aggressive price negotiation, which is very common in med device. And it just removes the hassle of the customer and the sales rep having to go through all that, and just really expedites the process. These are the tables or graphs that were in the report, just transferred over to a PowerPoint format. And this is the current competitor analysis that was also in the report. Again, all three companies, main competitors ranked for ease of conversion, breadth of product offerings, company support for e-commerce, and the utility of e-commerce to their sales process. And this is the same graph or the same table that was in the report as well, laid out, broken up into two pieces for the sake of the slide deck presentation. And the conclusion, so this would be where the presenter would wrap it all up and give their final pitch that, e-commerce is beneficial for a mid-size med tech company, and if you're going to do it, you need to go all in. You can't do it halfway or do it just a little bit. You need to commit to this, and if you do, and avoid the temptation of running parallel systems, which is something that has been known to happen. You don't want to keep running your manual system of ordering product through phone and fax and email, along with running the e-commerce site. You want to push all your customers to the e-commerce site as much as possible. And then just some references at the end that were used. I will mention that the icons were found online for free. I just gave the appropriate credit to the authors of those icons. So, conclusion for this project, the design and production method I thought proved very appropriate. I'm glad I didn't pursue the creation of an actual functional e-commerce site. I think that would have been risky for me and for the company that I work at to actually try to involve them in some way of creating a mock-up site, even if it was just a mock-up. I wouldn't want anything like that floating around on the internet. So I'm glad that I took the approach, was still able to do the research on the viability of e-commerce and med device sales without having to actually create a functional site. However, I do think the development of a functional site would be the next step if this was ever presented and accepted by a med tech company. It would be really interesting to see how that can be done. And one of the surprising finds that I came across was that sales automation in med tech is actually very common through large supply chain management systems, especially for the larger customers, but not for the smaller customers. But traditional e-commerce is not common. So with the way people think about it, going on Amazon and browsing products, that's not very common. And it's a way of shopping and buying that people are increasingly used to and prefer. So it's a little strange that this industry has really holden to the old way of doing things. And one great thing for future research would just be a deeper dive into competitors' e-commerce systems. There's plenty of people who have been in the industry and have worked at large companies, small companies, startups, mid-size. It would be great to consult with them and try to dig into and see what they know about e-commerce at the larger companies and how it can be applied to smaller companies and not be a risk for them, but actually be something they leverage to compete with the bigger fish. And one thing that I just didn't have the chance to do was pull actual medtech employee customers and the sales team to see what they think about the use of e-commerce within medtech, because the few people I have talked to seem to think it's a great idea. It's just the implementation of it is very scary. And so it would be great to actually do research on a wider scale to see what the general populace thinks about e-commerce in medtech. So that is my presentation, and thanks you guys for listening and paying attention.
Thanks, Dan. That was a really nice walkthrough of a complicated set of deliverables on a complicated topic, and I think you threaded the needle very nicely, giving us just enough information about an e-commerce platform for medical devices, but also illustrating both your slide deck and consultants report. So congratulations on threading the needle that way. And I do really like this model of having your thesis sitting over here and it being very, organized and detailed about what you did, and then having these two deliverables, the report and the slide deck. And I like how you kind of approach that. My suggestion would be this, very similar to my suggestion for Danielle and Jane's earlier tonight, is that your thesis document, what we'll call that your thesis document,
Okay.
maybe needs another title, right? Because the thesis, it shouldn't have the same title as the consultant's report, because the thesis is about writing the consultant's report. So might need a colon, and writing a consultant's project or something like that. And then the project should introduce the idea that this is what you're going to do, and you're going to make a report, you're going to deliver a slide deck, and it's going to be about this topic, and then go into the medical device. So just a slight alignment, and I think basically bringing the production design strategy part of your proposal, I think it's like page 10, something like right before the literature review, bringing that up, something very similar to that, bringing that to the front. So you might have to change some of the tense, but you kind of get into the topic, and then you get into the background on your literature review, and then you get into your methods of design. I think that would help, because then we'd know why we were reading your thesis project. But I think that's a pretty simple fix. And yeah, those are my comments. So Ryan, I don't know if you've got some thoughts, if you made it.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought process. I was really impressed with just seeing how this project developed from the earlier proposal stage, with the when we were discussing the sort of legal implications, and I think you've really taken the ball and run with this idea that with these two separate products that I'm actually weirdly familiar with consultants reports and their decks, and so I'm really impressed with the way you've differentiated between the two and really paid really good attention to the ways in which the audience, they basically are serving the same audience but serving different functions for this same or similar audiences at times, but whether it's in the boardroom or something like that, your attention to detail on that and the way you presented it tonight was really impressive. But then just to sort of echo what Steve was saying, from the title and some of the other elements of the thesis, as much as they differentiated the deck and the report, maybe just a little bit more of a restructuring to differentiate the thesis as like the third item, because that is really, it's a thesis about creating these two versus it being the exact, versus it just being like a third version of the same thing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
One very minor point on one of your slides, you had this really nifty little graphic about percentages, but it was the graphic, it suggested 25%, but your text suggested 10%.
Where is that at? In the actual?
I think it's
it was the pie. I think it was the pie chart on the
pie chart. Which
yeah.
I understood you're using.
Oh,
the pie chart.
Yeah.
I understand you're using it sort of as just a model of a pie chart, but
no, that irked me. I was like, oh wait, that's a quarter. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there it is, right there it is. Yep.
So just change it to 25%.
Right.
Yeah.
No, because if you're getting these assets from
but just that's like a super nitpicky thing, but I did notice that.
Yeah.
No, and that's something I could easily change myself.
Yeah.
Actually, so cool.
Can I mention something similar to that? Is as a visual designer, it would be interesting if you could take the icons that were in your slide deck and put them into your consulting group report. For instance, the benefits had an icon that showed benefits. And if you could move those icons so that visually you could sort of see something rather than just have text. Maybe that's too difficult at this stage, but
you might put that in your suggestions for further research section of your thesis.
Yeah, because icons are really useful to get an immediate sense of what you're talking about.
In your consultant's report, I like the Roman numerals. I don't think you need the letters in the subsections.
Okay.
I think that they distract. I don't think they add, but the Roman numerals help kind of place you. But I don't think you need the letters in the subsections.
Okay.
In either place. So that's a stylistic thing, but yeah. And I think yours, I think your table of contents is missing. I think you've got some, you're missing a list of figures.
I did send, so last night.
So you probably, I just, the version I had, so
yeah, sorry about that. I forgot to include that in the first one. And I did, after, Steve, after your suggestion, I did go back and automate the table of contents, which made my life easier. So I'm glad you suggested that. So I'll send that. That'll all be in there in the final packet.
Okay, great. So any other comments or questions? I know we're still 8 minutes late, so that's not too bad because we started 8 minutes late. So thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate it.